I want to make sure everyone. We thank all of you for coming out. We're very proud that the Up County has citizens that are concerned. We have, as you can see, standing room only, but we can always get more chairs. My name is Greg Wims, the Up County Regional Director. And first, before we start, I want to thank WorkSource Montgomery and Melissa. Wave your hand. Where are you, Melissa, for letting us? This is her space. This is actual people coming, looking for jobs. And then we have Marco Ovin, who is the hub director. Marco's in the back. He's split, so this space is split. So we have those. So thank you both. And then I also wanted to say we have two of our council members here tonight. We have Marilyn Balcom. So right there, you both know her. And then Don Lukey. Don, please wave. And I don't think, I'm going to make sure we don't have any more elected officials because our county executive, of course, is here and he'll be speaking later. So with that, I want to introduce you to the chair of the UCAB. This is Up County Citizen Advisory Board. Actually, with all the Up County Citizen Advisory Board members staying that are here, because these are the ones day in and day out that represent all of you, actually. Thank you very much. So with that, Wayne Ackes will take it there.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Wayne Ackes. I'm the chair of the Up County Citizen Advisory Board, and I want to welcome you guys to this program. It's a good conversation to have to address how the county will make decisions on major projects such as the construction of public schools, buildings, swimming pools, transportation improvement, improvements to sidewalks, improving the local parks, etc. So, and parking garage and established child care centers. So be respectful to all the speakers up here and make sure you silence your phone, and look forward to having a healthy discussion. And up next, we'll have Gary Nalvin from the Office of Management and Budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Citizens Advisory Board Forum. We're holding these meetings across the county to get community feedback as we kick off development of the next full capital budget. This is the fourth of 6 of these meetings we're having. 5 of them are in person, 1 of them is virtual. And this is your opportunity to let us know what needs you see in your community for new buildings and facilities and what your priorities are. Your feedback will be provided to county government departments and to the county executive as we begin the process of developing the FY25 capital budget. On behalf of the county executive and the Citizens Advisory Board, I'd like to thank you for coming out tonight to provide important feedback for the capital budget. Now we'll go over some capital budget basics. The county has 2 budgets. There's the operating budget, which funds services such as education, social services, and public safety. And the capital budget, which is going to be the focus of our conversation tonight, which funds construction of community buildings and facilities such as schools, roads, libraries, and fire stations. Some information on the Capital Improvements Program, or CIP. Buildings and infrastructure funded through capital budget are generally expensive, take a long time to build, and are expected to be around for a long time. For example, a library is expected to provide services to residents for many years after it's built. For these reasons, we typically support capital projects by the issuance of debt called general obligation bonds that the county pays back over a period of about 20 years, much as you would pay the mortgage on your house over a period of years. We program these projects in a 6-year plan because they take time to plan, design, and implement. New projects are typically added in the last 2 years where there's most capacity. The county has a biennial budget. This means that every 2 years, the county puts together what we call a full CIP, where we consider new projects and project changes. In other years, the county puts together what we call a biennial budget. Project changes in the biennial year have to meet certain amendment criteria. We're getting into the full capital budget cycle for fiscal years 25 through 30, and we're here seeking your feedback and priorities. We're doing this now so that county departments have time to incorporate the information as they develop their budget proposals, which will be submitted to the Office of Management and Budget this fall. We generally have 2 types of projects in the capital improvement program. Standalone projects construct major new buildings and infrastructure, such as a new library or a recreation center. These projects generally have their own separate project description form, or PDF, in the capital budget, which contains a summary of the project cost and a brief description of the need and what the facility will consist of. The first stage of planning, or the first stage of developing a new project is called facility planning, where the initial planning occurs to determine the scope of the project, what departments and programs it will serve, and what the general features of buildings will be. Projects in this stage are not often usually standalone projects yet, because we don't have enough funding information on the cost or what the project specifics are. When projects complete facility planning, they enter project design. Land is purchased if needed, and then they enter construction. Construction can take 2 to 3 years or longer, depending on the type of project. The other major type of project is a level of effort project. These repair existing infrastructure, such as roofs, sidewalks, and road resurfacing, in addition to smaller scale improvements, such as new sidewalks or new intersection improvements. These are projects where the county allocates a specified funding level, and then county departments determine each year which roads are repaved or which roofs are replaced based on need. We're currently working on a document that will provide the community with information on who to contact with questions and requests for level of effort projects. And we'll share this with your RSC directors and your community as soon as it's available, likely this summer. This chart shows expenditures, or how resources are allocated across categories for the current approved capital budget. You'll see that education, Montgomery County Public Schools, and Montgomery College account for about 40% of capital budget expenditures. Transportation accounts for another 30%, leaving only 30% remaining for other county activities, needing buildings and infrastructure, such as libraries, recreation centers, fire stations, and parks. And this chart illustrates the funding in the capital budget, or where the money comes from. The largest funding source is general obligation bonds, about 33% of funding. And this is long-term debt that the county takes on, like a mortgage on your house, to pay for the cost of constructing buildings. The county pays off this debt over 20 years through debt service payments funded in the operating budget. The next largest category is intergovernmental resources, so 25%. This is mainly state and federal funding. Recordation taxes make up about 14% of the funding, and this is a tax paid by home buyers and borrowers when their mortgage is recorded. Because this revenue is tied to real estate transactions, it can be very volatile. And these revenues have been declining recently due to the housing market, which has made it necessary to reduce or delay certain projects. The CIP priorities are listed here in alphabetical order. Some of the executive's major priorities include schools, affordable housing, economic development, transportation, racial equity, and climate change. Some ways that you can help to shape the capital budget through your feedback include attending budget forums such as this one, attending council hearings on the capital budget, volunteering for county boards, committees, and commissions, writing to the county executive, county council, and school board members, and you can report needed infrastructure repairs via the MC 311 hotline. So Montgomery County Public Schools is a separate agency from county government, but they share funding sources in the capital budget. School construction is the largest category of spending in the county CIP, with prioritization and programming of school projects being largely driven by the elected school board, which adopts and transmitted a capital budget to the county executive each year. The executive reviews this recommendation in early December and then determines how much can be allocated for the recommended budget to support MCPS. The executive recommends this lump sum. However, the executive does not usually make recommendations on individual schools projects. We follow similar processes with Montgomery College, Park and Planning, and WSSC Water, so you should contact these agencies directly with your requests. And here's the contact information for those outside agencies. This illustrates the capital budget process and timeline. The process starts in spring, when we have these forums and collect community feedback so the county departments can consider it and include it in their fall capital budget requests. In September, OMB will receive and review the capital budget requests, and the executive will begin meeting with departments in October through late December to review the budget requests. In January, the county executive transmits the recommended capital budget to the council, at which point it becomes council's budget to approve. Occasionally in March and April, there are amendments to address operating budget needs and state aid adjustments. Racial equity is an important consideration in capital budget decisions. Starting in FY23, we began the use of a budget equity tool, which is a series of questions that guide county departments to consider the impacts of their projects on racial equity. The Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice uses responses to these questions to provide analysis and recommendations to the county executive. For the coming full CIP, we're also working to reach out to communities that have not been actively engaged in the past. And in this past budget year, racial equity guided some of our decisions on project deferrals and reductions when adjustments needed to be made due to a downturn in liquidation tax collections. I'd encourage you all to view the county's open budget website for information on the county budget and on projects in your area. You can also see our budget publications, including the executive's recommended FY24 capital budget. For questions on the capital budget, you can contact Mary Beck or Rachel Silberman at the Office of Management and Budget. And now it's my pleasure to introduce County Executive Mark Elrich, who will give some discussion on the fiscal context for the budget.
So, does anybody know where the light controls are in this room? There's got to be a way to turn off some of these lights. All in or all out? Let's see what it looks like with all off. Are you kidding me? It's energy efficient, except when you want someone to be able to read the thing you've got up on the board here. This is okay. So I'm going to go through the fiscal context for the budget, because you can't talk about the capital budget without thinking about the operating budget. The capital budget is part of the total budget we put together. As you can see, it's a large chunk of the amount of money that the county spends. We've got about $130 million, I think, of what would have been operating money, general fund money in the capital budget. And we float bonds for much more of the capital budget. And bond funding has been really important to the county. During Ike's years, we did a lot of bond funding because interest rates are very low. And they made a very reasonable calculation that because of inflation and construction, it made more sense to build things early rather than to build things later, because they would cost more money later. Right now, I wish we had built some of the things we didn't build over the last couple of years, because we had very low construction rates, or lower construction rates, lower interest rates. Now we're dealing with high inflation and high interest rates. So projects now will cost us less than if some of them had been built earlier, which would have meant taking on debt earlier. But sooner or later, you're going to take on the debt, and sooner or later, you're going to pay for it. So it would have been wiser to do some things earlier. And there's some other things that might have been wiser. Go on to the next one. No, back. No, back. There. So this budget shows you where what our commitments are for general operating funds. And the school system is getting about 51, almost 52% of all the operating funds in this budget go to the school system. PAYGO is the $34 million roughly that we contribute in terms of cash for capital projects. So if we had a $334 million, $334 million capital budget, we'd put $34 million in cash and we borrow $300 million. The rest of the budget gets about $1.2 billion. That's the stuff you see at the community level. This is police, fire, recreation, health and human services. All those things come out of the 1.2 billion. So you hear a lot about Montgomery County's $6.8 billion budget. But in terms of things that you experience in day-to-day life, about 1.2 is actually in the programming of the county. And this is one of the things that makes our challenges really large, because when you take out police and fire and corrections, which is how many 100 million between them? You guys remember what the number is for that? Yeah, that's a big number for those three things, and it doesn't leave very much for everything else in the budget. And then debt service is $435 million right now. Next slide. So in the early years of Ike's administration, you can see the slope on debt was going up, because these are the years we were building the schools. I will say this, I was not a fan of life before Ike. And one of the things that happened to the county, we grew really rapidly, and they built no infrastructure, because political leadership was intent on saying, we can have all this growth and it doesn't cost you anything. And Ike came in and he's building schools and he's building rec centers and all the things that didn't get built to deal with an expanding population. He doubled the amount of money that was spent on road resurfacing, which still isn't nearly enough. Those are the problems that he inherited. And I come in over here. And so our spending, because we knew we'd entered a constrained world, went down. The other thing the council did, when I was on the council 6 years ago, we were spending $340 million on bonds. Right now, we're going to average $280 million over the next 6 years. So that's $60 million less in bond funding, $360 million less in 6 years that's going to get spent on capital projects. That's $60 million a year, not available for additional road servicing, not available for rec center renewals, not available for a lot of different things. I don't agree with the direction that we've gone on that, but for the moment, that's the county's direction. So we're borrowing less, but it also means we're doing less. And that's the challenge you're going to have later when you sit in the focus groups to talk about what you want to see built. The pie has gotten smaller, and schools continue to take up the bulk of the pie. And so it really constrains things. The school budget, capital budget, is not funded this year fully. It was not fully funded last year. It hasn't been fully funded for a number of years, because when you take all that money out of the budget for capital projects, you cannot fully fund the school budget. Just not possible. There's not enough money in there. Next. This kind of gives you a picture of what the total bond obligation bonds that we've issued has been. And over there, the 500 million was a refinancing of a lot of short-term debt that they took on when the county was moving facilities around. They didn't sell all the property they anticipated selling when they thought they were going to sell it. They couldn't carry the short-term debt, so they had to turn it into long-term debt, and that's the blip in the radar at the 500 million. Next. So everything has costs. There are opportunity costs for everything we do. So for every $1 million used for debt service, this is what it would buy. And it is not all the things on this list. You could buy any one of these things for $1 million. You could hire 8 firefighters. You could staff 1 mid-sized library for a year. You could operate 3 recreation community centers. You could provide additional rental assistance to 416 families. You could provide emergency shelter for 160 clients. You could provide child care subsidies for 143 children for a year. You could assist 1,274 county-funded maternity partnership program clients. You could prune 2,100 trees if that's your choice. And you could renovate 91 bus stops. Each one of those would have cost $1 million. The choices on the other side of this, these are the debt service trade-offs. What $20 million in additional debt will buy you? Construct 1 elementary school addition. Buy 4 high school wellness centers. Refresh 4 libraries. Replace 14 fire station heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. build 7 new long-span bridges, resurface 95 miles of residential roadway, or improve 491,000 feet of curb, gutter, and sidewalk. So that's what 20 million buys you, any one of those things. Next. So the capital budget challenges are pretty clear. We have great needs in the county, and the needs have only grown. We've got more people demanding more things, and we're trying our best to figure out how we do this. We've also been hit by inflation, and we got hit by, I'd say unprecedented, but I was old enough to grow up when inflation was 12 or 13% a year. So it's not exactly unprecedented, but it's a lot higher than it's been in recent memory. You know, most of the last few years, we were muddling along at inflation under 2% for several years. And before that, normal was 3 or 4%. The inflation of the last year, thank you, Chairman Powell, has been much different, much higher rates of inflation, 7, 8, 9% inflation. Our CIP funding sources have been reduced. Again, councils have made decisions like giving developers a pass on impact taxes for some projects. That money would have gone to fund schools and transportation. Not decisions that I favored. I think I vetoed that one. And recordation taxes and transfer taxes actually went down this year because of the drop in home sales. When we were putting together our budget and we weren't dealing with the school system's request, we were counting on a normal school system request. Even with the decline in these taxes, we probably would have had a balanced budget with no tax increase. So we were in pretty good shape up until the schools made a request. And the county has limited other resources. The state, the governor was in the same box we were when he came into office. He thought he was going to have a $2.5 billion surplus. He planned $1 billion of what he was going to do with it. And within a week or two, the state discovered that they had miscalculated the poverty formula for schools in the entire state. And the governor's $1 billion of another surplus vanished because it had to be spent on the poverty formula. So that money was taken out, and he had $500 million left, and he wasn't able to do nearly the things that he'd hoped he was going to be able to do. And that's not anybody's fault, but the people have miscalculated the way you're supposed to count poverty in the first place. So in this budget, you know, we continue to direct some one-time funding into the capital budget. There's $357 million that we're going to be getting from the state between now and FY27 to pay for school construction. So it helps us, and we'd be in even deeper trouble if we didn't have this, but it was not enough to close the gap that we have this year or last year. This count that we have exceeded the 10% operating budget reserve target. The county's target has been 10% forever. We never reached it until my administration. We hit it during the first year of COVID, and the reserves we were left with at the end of last year was 14%. So we've been careful and conserving money so that we can do other things with that money. And I'm really happy to say we did that, but we also wind up needing that money. But now we're able to fund this budget without dipping into reserves because we do have some surplus we can use. We expected, and we do expect that we'll continue to get increases in state and federal transportation funding. We got additional money from the state for transportation. A number of our projects are going to be eligible for federal funding, so we're not going to have to be funding these things entirely on our own. And we've maintained our AAA bond rating throughout this whole thing, and that's something everybody should be a little bit concerned with. It affects interest rates, so the lower the bond rating, the less it costs us to borrow money. So everything was fine, and then along came the FY24 recommended public school budget. And the school system asked for an increase of $296 million over last year. And we've never had a request like that ever before. The most they've ever gotten in 1 year over the previous year was $100 million. Of the 296 they asked for, 75 is coming from the state, 222 or 221 is coming from the county, And the tax increase basically equals the 221 that would help us fund the school budget. And I'll talk to you about why I think it's important. The school system is suffering, from COVID already. They've had a large loss of teachers. This year, they're still not fully staffed with teachers. They're going into more resignations, and it's anticipated they may not be able to fill resignations that they're going to be meeting this summer. They're not going to be able to fill those up, and this impacts learning in schools. Teachers are literally doubling up on classes. So teachers are being asked, and particularly if somebody's missing, that you have to teach 2 classes instead of 1 class. This is not sustainable. And I'll get into the other worst parts about this, but the 10-cent property tax is solely devoted to schools. It cannot be used for anything else. It has to go to meet the school budget. And I think it's imperative that we make greater investments, and the following slides will kind of explain why. So the next slide. So this slide shows what the county was spending on schools over the past, going back to 2001. And this line and this line go together. This is county school funding. This is, and that's total school funding over there. That's the dotted line. This is our funding. This is our actual funding. That's if you adjusted it for inflation. So in 2010, we were spending the equivalent of $15,827 per student. Today, we're spending $12,744 per student. So for those of you who may want to ask me later, what has happened to our schools? What happened to our schools is we stopped investing in them. This county was proud of the school system it had. We knew year after year we needed to put more money into the schools. We stopped doing it. And we did it in 2010 because we got a waiver for maintenance of effort. There's a state law that requires the county to spend the same amount as they spent the previous year, adjusted for inflation and population growth. And that's the minimum requirement the school system had, or the county government had, in terms of funding schools. In 2010, because of the recession and because our revenues had flat out collapsed, there was no way we were going to be able to spend that money. And so we got a waiver. The waiver was great. It bought us time. The mistake that was made is we never restored the funding. We got by the collapse of revenues, and then things started moving up again. We did not put the money back in the schools. So as you can see, they've been on a descent in per pupil funding. And this is the state chart. And this is the decline with the state. State revenues have actually gone up, but not nearly enough to make up for the loss in county spending on schools. And now you can go to the next slide and you'll see how we compare. Montgomery County used to be the best funded school system anywhere. We had the highest paid teachers. We were spending more per pupil than anybody. This is Montgomery County today. There. That's Howard County. That's Baltimore County. That's Baltimore City, which does get a ton of money from the state that we don't get, nobody else gets. And that's Anne Arundel County. All of them spend more on a per pupil basis than we do now. No longer number one. Even with this tax increase, we wind up over there. We won't be number one, but we'll be better than number 1, 2, 3, 4. We'd be better than 5th. But it's kind of the problem we find ourselves in. We're competing with these other jurisdictions for teachers. And this is part of the problem. We are not spending what we need to spend. Next slide. So in order to recruit staff, they need to raise teacher salaries. Teachers in Montgomery County start at about $53,000 a year. This is below many other jurisdictions in the state right now. Washington, D.C., which you could live in Montgomery County and go teach in Washington, D.C., just up their starting teacher paid to $75,000 a year. 22 over where we sit right now. So we're trying to compete with that. In July of 2026, state law requires that every jurisdiction in the state of Maryland has starting pay of $60,000. So you could earn $60,000 in Montgomery County, face the highest cost of living of any jurisdiction in the state, or you could go over to the Eastern Shore, get 15 minutes from the beach, get the same $60,000, have rents that are 2/3 of what you would pay here, or live in almost any other county in the state of Maryland and make the same money and have a lower cost of living. That's the competition the school system is going to face for teachers. And it's not a good place for us to be. And so if the schools are important, this is something we have to deal with. And people are, ask me, why, if you don't have kids, why should you worry about this? Why does this matter? It matters because your home values are dependent absolutely on people's impressions of the schools. And if people don't think that the schools are good schools, your house is not worth what it used to be worth, particularly if it's a change in impression. We see these differences inside of Montgomery County. We all know there are places where the property values are highest and the schools, oddly enough, are considered the best in the county. That's not a coincidence. And there are places where perceived schools having greater difficulties and the property values are lower. And I live in Tacoma Park, and I lived in Tacoma Park when we went through unification. Part of the city was in Prince George's County, part was in Montgomery County. If you were on the Montgomery County side of that line, the houses, same house in Prince George's County, a block away, was tens of thousands of dollars less than the house in Montgomery County. All the other services were the same. Everything about Tacoma Park was the same. The only service that was different was the schools. That's the box we found ourselves in. When it unified, property values kind of got uniform throughout the city. And this is the thing that people need to be concerned with. Your property, if you had a $500,000 house, this tax will cost you $500. The loss in value of your house, if people perceive Montgomery County as not having competitive schools, is going to be a hell of a lot more than $500. And you can guarantee that. This is not propaganda. This is real world of taxes. And if you're worried about the schools, these numbers ought to jar you a little bit too. Only 31% of MCPS students scored proficient in math. 53% of MCPS students scored proficient in English. COVID had some effect on that. COVID is not the entire reason for it. So these are the challenges that the school system is facing. And this is why I made the unpleasant decision to fund the full school budget, because all of that money, 75% of that money, goes to pay teacher salaries. The rest of the money goes to hire additional teachers for things like special education, and where we have our special education population has grown and other programs where they need teachers. If the school system had come to me and said that they wanted $300 million for programs, I never would have given them the money. Because until they can show us, we do have accountability problems. I'm not going to say we don't. And we're hamstrung by the state right now because the county has no ability. I can't even target spending by categories within the school budget. I can't say you need to get rid of this program because everybody knows it doesn't work. So we're stuck with having to fund what comes over to us, like it or not. And there are a lot of county executives, I can say safely, all the Republican and Democratic county executives want to make this an issue in the next legislative system to give local governments some say over school spending and require the schools to be accountable in ways that are measurable so we understand whether the money is being spent reasonably or it's not being spent reasonably. But that requires a state change in state law, unfortunately. Next. So this is a chart of Montgomery County's tax burden. Because I had a reporter say to me, so if you raise your taxes, people are going to go to Howard County. Howard County's property tax is $1.25. They're not going to Howard County. Of course, Howard County spends way more than we do on schools. They have the same income tax we do. Their houses are expensive like our houses are. So if you go to Howard County, you're going there and you're going to pay more money on taxes. Frederick's taxes are higher than ours are right now. Fairfax County's taxes are higher than ours are right now. This chart comes out of a study that's done by the District of Columbia. Every 2 years, they do a residential assessment of taxes, total taxes for residents. It's not property taxes for residents. They look at all the taxes that residents pay at all the jurisdictions around the District of Columbia. Fairfax City, Arlington, Alexandria, Fairfax, Falls Church, Prince George's County, Montgomery County, and Washington, D.C. Every one of those jurisdictions except Washington, D.C., the residential tax burden is higher than Montgomery County. The base tax in Fairfax County is $1.11 or 99 cents. They're $1.11. You add in all their other taxes, their taxes are higher than ours are. This is DC's study. They use this to put themselves in what they consider a competitive space. DC is the lowest tax jurisdiction. And there's a really easy answer why they are. Montgomery County and the counties in the state of Maryland have a unified tax rate. You tax commercial property the same as you tax residential property. In Fairfax County, they tax the two the same at the base tax, but they have additional taxes on commercial property. Every square inch of commercial property in Fairfax County pays 12.5 cents. Another 12.5 cents. So that makes their base rate for commercial property $1.23. If you add all the other taxes they have in Fairfax County, including special taxing districts, Fairfax County at Tyson's Corner, where all the bright shiny development is about $1.60. Montgomery County for 99 cents. So other people charge for more than this. DC is lower because their residential property tax is 85 cents. Their commercial property tax goes from about $1.65 and it peaks at $1.89 per commercial property. So imagine the amount of money they get in these other jurisdictions from commercial property taxes that help fund their budgets, while we're not able to do the same thing. And on top of that, Fairfax County has, Northern Virginia counties have something called the BPOL tax. It is essentially a 3% tax on gross receipts on all commercial businesses. So if you're a part-time retired accountant doing bookkeeping for a few people at home, you pay 3% gross receipts tax. So all that money flows into the Fairfax County budget. Montgomery County has no such tax on commercial property, does not have a 12.5 cent separate tax on commercial property for transportation. We have none of the tools they have. So when you look across the river and say, why do they have nice things and we don't have nice things? They have a tax system that creates nice things, and our tax system doesn't even come close to generating the kind of revenues they're able to generate. And this is something I've been arguing about at the council since I was on the council. We should adopt a system that looks like Fairfax's system. It's a lot fairer. And, you know, frankly, the taxes in Virginia are taxes that the developers asked for, because they realized that when they went to the council in Fairfax for transportation projects 12 years ago, the county said the same thing we would say. There's no way we're building this. We don't have the revenues. So the developers, the builders, and the council went down to a Republican legislature and a Republican governor and said, give the Northern Virginia counties taxing authority. And they did. And the Northern Virginia counties used the taxing authority to build things that they need in order to spur development. And Montgomery County can do none of those things. So these are all factually true. This is not my work. This is DC's work. Over here, where's that map? Go back to the map. So this is a map of the state of Maryland. The white counties are the lowest tax jurisdictions in the state of Maryland. The yellow counties are the second lowest tax. So we're in the same company as Washington County, Allegheny County, Anne Arundel County, Calvert County, Caroline County, and Wycomico County. All of the light blue ones have a higher tax rate than we do. All of the medium blue ones have a higher tax rate than the light blue ones, and the dark blue ones have higher tax rates than anybody else. So you are not a high tax county compared to anybody else in the state of Maryland. We're not the lowest, but we're far from the highest. And this is a problem for us. If, I think at some point, and I'm not afraid to say this. I mean, you either decide is the most important thing this county does, the tax rate, or is the most important thing this county does, educate your children and create an environment where you want to live and where you want to raise your families and have the opportunities that you want for yourself and for your children. If you want the latter, it requires a willingness to spend some more money. If we want to do it fairly, we could spread it out like they do in Fairfax, so the burden is carried by a broader segment of the population. But if your goal is only to have the lowest taxes, then we will continue to not be able to pay teachers. The salary increases the teachers get will be out the window. You can reduce services in the county. This budget has about $40 million for rent relief. I could not do the rent relief. We'll just evict more people. I've got $6 million in there for food relief, and we expect to take $6 million out of reserves during the course of the year. That'll just mean hungry people. I mean, there's things we could save money on, but they're all going to come at a cost to the community. And so my vote was to make the decision to take the tax increase and put it into the schools in order to keep the other services we're trying to provide intact. If I had to cut $222 million out of what you saw in that earlier chart, the $1.2 billion, and you knock out 600 or 700 million for the whole public safety stuff, there's not a lot of places to take that money from. We have increases in this budget for police officers and for firefighters and for the county workers. We've got 20,000 signing bonus for police officers because we are struggling. We're competing against jurisdictions that are now outbidding us. We went up to 20 to match the highest around us. One of them has already gone to 25. So these are the forces that we're dealing with and trying to bring this budget in. And as I said before, there would be no tax increases if we hadn't been worried about this. Next slide. This is one of my other favorite slides, also from the District of Columbia. They do a comparison of commercial property taxes. You hear the developer say, oh, Montgomery County is a high tax place, I'm going to go to Virginia. No, you're not. This is Washington, D.C. I told you their cap is $1.89. That's Alexandria. That's Arlington County. That's Fairfax. That's Prince George's. The lowest tax jurisdiction in the region for commercial property is us. So we raise the least amount of money out of commercial property of any of the people we compete with. Again, that's part of the problem. I can't solve that problem this year, but I will be proposing changes in how we approach our tax structurally because we can't go on like this. If we're going to stay at the bottom, then you're going to watch a lot of other things disappear. It is not going to be where you want to be. So we've got to find a place where there's better balance for us than there is right now. Next. So the last thing you can do is go to breakout sessions. I just wanted to deal with this because A, it's an elephant in the room. Everybody, you're here to talk about capital. I know a lot of you are thinking about operating and a lot of you are thinking about the taxes, but I think it's important that you have a context for the decisions we made. We'd have more money in capital if we took money out of operating, but if I take money out of operating, you're going to lose services that you want to have. And so part of the discussion you're going to have now is about capital. We'll be back to you in the fall. If you know, I did the circular before I did the operating budget. I'll go back in front of the community again, and you can talk about things that you think you want to see in the operating budget. And, we'll have those conversations, and I'll try to produce a budget like we did this year that reflected a lot of what the community asked us to do. So I'll take a couple of questions, and I'll turn you loose to the breakout sections. Greg, you need to, oh, okay. Wayne, okay.
Hello, my name is Patrick Sassu Jr. I'm an MC student studying communications and I'm transferring to the University of Maryland at College Park at the Shady Grove campus. I'm a resident here in Parkford, Maryland. Facilities are important and accessible for a quality education. Quality facilities are critical. The student service building on the Rockville campus at MC not only allows me to meet new peers, but has allowed me to do work for my internship with MC Votes. We will promote voter registration. Also, the Paul Peak Academic and Innovation Building has been where I've been able to take courses for my Southern Management Entrepreneurship Leadership Program. So thank you for these buildings. We also thank you for the Leggett Math and Science Building in the Tacoma Park campus at the Silver Spring campus, where we will have modern math and science classrooms and labs too. With the right facilities like the Leggett Building and our other STEM buildings, students can get the right education that they need. The student service centers make it easy for students to find advisors, financial aid counselors, and other services so easily and all in one building. Libraries also give students access to technology, expensive textbooks, and study spaces that we need. For example, the library has given me a place to study after I've gone to class and before I have to be at my job. Having access means having a campus nearby. With all campuses around the county, students have access to the education that we need. With the East County campus, more people will have access to the education that they desire and they need. Thank you, Mr. Eldridge, for leading this effort to bring the East County campus so more people like us can have educations at MC. Please continue to provide quality facilities for Montgomery College students like my peers and me.
Thank you.
My name is George Carlisle. I saw your presentation. It looks like there's some real issues that we have to decide today, discuss. But one of the questions I'm curious, how I don't see these schools doing anything to get federal money to support their growth or their agenda. Can you possibly talk with them to discuss pursuing federal educational funding programs? Due to COVID, there are numerous programs. I've made personal visits to the Board of Education to show them this, but they are not interested in pursuing it.
So the school system received from federal money because of COVID, they received over $300 million, I think, at the peak. They're spending out this year and next year, probably the last 140 million of that, then the money's gone after that. That money goes to programs. One of our concerns is if they're budgeting for programs they expect to continue after next year, there's not going to be any money to continue them after next year unless the federal government comes back in. So we're actually asking them I've asked them to contribute some of that money to this year's budget and next year's budget to soften the need for the taxes being as high as 10 cents. And I'm hopeful at the end of the day, they'll agree that you shouldn't start a program this year or next year that you're not going to be able to continue in years 2 and 3.
Hello, my name is Sarah Incesario, and I live in Southern Mill Apartments, which is right across from Lake Forest Mall. And I'm an 8th grader, and I've been an activist since I was in 5th grade, and I've testified a few times to get my elementary school, South Lake, to be on the budget and plans for renovation, which is currently in progress, and to bring after-school programs to our community. I also testified at the State House in Annapolis for the Maryland Blueprint and at Gaithersburg City Hall on behalf of the youth in my neighborhood, which is in Southern Mill Apartments in Montgomery Village. And today I stand in front of you to speak on behalf of the 100,000 plus youth in Montgomery Village. Southern Mill is a massive complex with 864 units and many children and teens from elementary to high school. However, if you drive through the neighborhood after school, you won't see many kids outside playing, especially females, because our community doesn't have adequate space where we can be safe and have access to programming. I'm currently a black belt in Taekwondo, and I have to travel far to get to training. My siblings and friends have no space to play basketball or safe places outdoors to play soccer or football without having to travel very far. The closest community center is over a 30-minute walk, which is dangerous for us. The youth of the community and I really want a community center in our neighborhood. I think it is a necessity to have a space with an arcade, jobs for teens, and an ice cream shop, a coffee shop, but also a sports complex with an indoor swimming pool, a basketball court, and a soccer field. Please consider including funds for a proper space for us so we can thrive in our community. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Rachel Wagner. I'm here asking about the Clarksburg Library specifically. There was a needs assessment done in 1998. It is a county record. It is on your websites. I looked it up. They assessed the need in 1998, from 1998 to 2003. That's 20 years ago. And the residents are still waiting for a library. We've been told there is another delay to the project, which is a study to decide if the space is right and if additional housing or funding or whatever needs to be done. But again, 20 years later, we're still waiting on the library. A lot of our kids are, growing up. They've not had a library in the county. And to be quite honest, Up County gets left behind and we are not represented. And you are at a group of people that are here at the Up County Recreation Center where our taxes go to other parts of the county and we don't get what we need, period. So I love that you're thinking about our schools, but I want to know, can our money go in our own pot for our own stuff? Because we don't want to support everybody else getting the stuff they need and Up County getting left behind. It's not fair. We've been waiting and waiting and waiting, and they just keep building houses and houses and houses. And there's nothing that we can show for it. People are going to Frederick. There was a study that was just done where people are leaving Montgomery County and going over the line. And we know that to be true because we have to go to Urbana Library or we have to use Urbana services. So we're well aware of how that works here.
So your library has been a casualty of dealing with this
20 years
developer in
later.
the shopping center.
Yes.
And so
I'm
we're
very
back,
frustrated.
we're back at dealing with that again. I will say that it's an example of, I personally think that our county's impact fees and things should cover infrastructure. They shouldn't have built Clarksburg without widening 355 coming out of Clarksburg. You should never have allowed it to get reduced to 2 lanes. Not you, but the county should never have allowed it. They should have figured out how they were going to fund the school. I was on the council. Nobody could ever figure out how to put that into the budget. And when they took the impact fees, that stupid fee that everybody up there had to pay, that didn't help the situation, but it was really wrong, but it would have been done to the residents up there. So we will continue to try to get this thing into the budget and resolve the issue with the developer. With the developer of the shopping center. I have no objection. I would have funded it before.
Can we be grandfathered in?
But you are getting, but they are getting.
If the needs assessment was done 20 years ago, why do we have to abide by a new law that was just now the 2023 assessment that says they have to do this study? If we had the
Because
needs,
we don't control the developer there and what he's trying to build there. He never delivered what he was supposed to deliver. There's been an ongoing discussion about how that project is supposed to integrate with the retail project up there.
but I think the project's already been allocated. We are just on hold for another year for another study. That's the way I understand it.
This is the property where it's either co-locating affordable housing or child care center. That's the holdup for this year.
But they've got the money in the budget to build this thing.
Yes, it's on hold. It's on hold for a year because of the county's requirement to look for affordable housing or child care.
No, they've done this. They've done the housing thing with other projects. They've raised that. So
that's the issue.
yeah. You're right. They have a small library, but better than, I was going to say, better than no library.
Hey,
I hear you.
Okay. My name's Danny Trupus. I've product with Montgomery County since 1952. I went to public school. By the way, people have been leaving Montgomery County since the late 90s going to Polk County for lots of reasons, mostly housing, a lot less expensive. I'm not saying they won't catch up. They get higher. But the fact of the matter is that we have plenty of land in this county. And, you know, you talk about Clarksburg, I got news for you. I have a client, I'm a realtor. I have a client who wanted to buy a piece of property in Clarksburg on 355, and we're told she could not buy that and develop it because the county wanted to put affordable housing apartments. That's the truth. By the way, how much money is the federal government giving you to develop the property, the old fire and rescue property that you're going to build a bunch of apartments on? You know how much they're giving you?
Federal government?
Yeah. I mean,
We didn't ask the federal government for money for housing.
Well, then why is it that you jumped the affordable housing on this 600 apartments from 15% to 30%?
Because the county has a severe shortage of affordable housing.
Okay. And you're telling
It's a
me
real thing.
You're telling me you're getting no money from the federal government to do this.
No,
Well, I like to see that to believe that.
I can't show you. Look, zero doesn't show up anywhere.
Doesn't mean you're not going to get it eventually.
No, we're not going to get any money from the federal government.
Well, let's talk about schools for a second. Okay. Just take it. Yeah. On greatschools.org, that's who we send our clients to look at school ratings. They have 22 Montgomery County high schools. 8 of them are rated 6 and above. 14 of them are rated 5 and below. 5 and below. And that I hear from the school board that they want to maybe bus people from one end of the county to the other end of the county to go to better schools. Would it not be better if you just fired everybody that had poor ratings in their schools?
Ooh, wow. First place, there's no proposal from the school board to bus anybody across the county.
You fund them.
There's no proposal for what you're saying. You shouldn't say stuff that's not true. No, the school board is not proposing busing people from one end of the county to the other.
All right, thank you, sir.
Okay.
Let's go to the next person.
My name's Peter Stelnick. I'm actually Rockville, so I don't even know which district I should be in for the hearing.
You're fine.
I used to live. I guess it's up county. I don't know. I'm not Bethesda. I'm not Silver Spring. I'm not. So figure that one out. But I don't know. There's no hearing in between. I guess you go to Bethesda. Come up here. Please control. Okay.
Am I going to be in between?
I wish. Well, I'm sympathetic to the argument about competitiveness with the teachers, the students, or the teachers and salaries. I've been to the county school, budget sessions, right? Realize a lot of that is the salaries and benefits, right, to the employees, to the teachers.
Most of that's what it is.
My question is, and I understand, you get the different tax rates. How do we get so far behind in competitiveness? And I guess the question is also, what do we do to break out of that, or have that accountability, as George had suggested, right, with the budget? And then the second comment, and I guess question is, how do you reconcile, because the word here is inflation, right? It's hit everybody. And I guess my gut response is, everybody got a 10% raise last year, right? No problem. Exactly. And so, I get it. That's the easy answer. I guess you got to dig into it more further, right? But then the way you presented it with the real estate, everybody's paid higher taxes as a result of higher property values, the increased taxes at the income level. So there's already an escalation. So the tax factor is higher in terms of the total cost to the residents. And my point is, we accept, or I guess I accept, at some level, paying a higher amount right? It's indexed to inflation, but it's got to be in context to what you get and also what you earn, right? Squeezing people. We had a neighbor that put their house up because they said, my kids are done with school. We don't need this and we can't afford it. So I guess
you've asked a complex question, I guess.
I hear you. Yeah.
But so a couple of things. One is that Montgomery County's property tax was higher. It was up to $1.03 only a few years ago. And one of the problems we had this stupid tax law that was put into effect. And people thought it limited their tax increases. All it did was limit the amount the county could raise, which kept us falling behind because we weren't able to take advantage, say, of inflation in commercial property. And the best example I give it, if I gave somebody like Marriott a huge tax break and their project comes online with the tax break and then say 5 years later they pay the full tax, under the old law, that money would go toward a cap. And if I hit the cap, I had to lower everybody's tax rate. So we were limited in what we could raise no matter what the values of property were in the county. And it boxed us. Nobody else had the stupid system we had. Nobody else did what we did. And so we'd raise taxes and then they'd go down every year because we'd hit this limit on what we could raise and we took it down. It kept us from growing naturally, which we should have been able to do. So it's handicapped our ability to do things we need to do. That's the old system. The voters changed it 2 years ago. And last year we saw the first real benefit of it. We weren't limited. Our revenues weren't limited. So we could actually, for example, if commercial property went higher, we didn't have to worry about, well, man, if it gets really good, I have to lower the tax rate to keep the number down. So we got rid of better place than we were, but we've got a lot of accumulated problems. And the point I made about dropping the school funding 12 years ago has had a lasting impact because we never went back up and said, okay, let's go back to where we were and make that the normal. We set our normal down here. Other jurisdictions didn't do that. So it's been a challenge for us, which is what brings me here.
Yeah. Last comment is you broke out the expense or the total tax burden. Be nice to see that breakout in terms of the school funding. Is it suggested from the state?
I think the school that was on the first pie chart.
Federal level?
It's 52%.
Yeah.
And almost all of it's county. It's county money, a little bit of state money, and almost no federal money. The feds are not a player in local school systems. There are people who've asked them to become players, but they're not right now. So I think I got to go. They want to do breakout sections.
Couple things. This presentation is available online, so if anybody wants to take a look at it, please feel free to go ahead and do that. Thank you, Mark, for your time.
Thank you.
And I want to say that Chief of Staff to Councilmember Lorian Sales is here rolling, so thank you. Just want to acknowledge that. I know there's still a lot of questions to be asked, and there are going to be some breakout rooms that you're more than welcome to ask any questions you want. Okay? Appreciate it. And I think we call Jake to point to where everybody's going.
Thank you all very much. And stay in tune.